This is the Movie Theater Butter Podcast, where we talk about stories made into movies and what was modified for the big screen. As a warning, this episode will discuss the plot of both the movie and its original source material, so be ready for spoilers. I'm your host, Kim Labick, and I hope you enjoy the show. Well, there ain't no love in Oklahoma, but there's a hell of a lot of tornadoes. On today's episode of the Movie Theater Butter Podcast, we're talking Twisters, and David is getting really on my nerves immediately, but like in a fun way, in a fun, friendly way.
No, that's great. I haven't watched like the local news in a while, and that was giving very like Saturday morning local news.
Good.
That was very cute and sincere. I like that.
Thank you. It's supposed to kind of be like that. I don't know. I feel like I'm just going to edit it into not existing, and that's totally fine. I'm Kim Labick, an indie producer, director, writer, and today I'm joined by reoccurring guest and a good friend of mine, David Cahill. David, tell the people why you think they should give a fuck about your opinions on movies.
Hey, well, first of all, this is actually the only subject you should give a fuck about, my opinion. I grew up obsessed with movies. Have spent the past multiple years of my career doing everything I can, working on all sorts of like movies and narrative content, worked on multiple shows, which is where I met Kim, including like NCIS. These days, I'm more of a producer, working on more of my own like personal projects. And and I spend way too much time on Letterboxd. So
yeah. Hell yeah. And you're, one of the few people in our world who can get away with that. I have such a love-hate relationship with Letterboxd, and it's the same reason why, like, part of the reason why I started this podcast in the first place. I get so mad when, like, this is so shitty. I get so mad when the average person has a hot take on a movie. I'm like, I would love to just like talk about this in person in real life and have like a discussion. That's fun. But then like if you're going to go online and you've never made a movie and you don't know the process and you don't know shit about it, and you're gonna be like 1 star, hated it, not going to this like whole critique thing, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about, man. Talk about it with friends. Don't put that on Letterboxd. But people like David, people like myself, we're allowed to do that because this is our work. This is our art. This is our life. Don't get mad at me. Everyone's a critic. We're the only ones who are allowed to be. Anyways.
Yeah, well, on Letterboxd, there's no good like place for a rebuttal. Like, there's like a comment section, but it's not close enough. Like, you should look at someone's review and immediately under it just see me like absolutely hating on them and being way too aggressive than I should be for someone I don't know. I just
or have like a really like classist, shitty like verification system where you can be like, yeah, this person's checked because like they work in the industry. This person's not. They're just like no one. It's okay. We're all
there should be like a meter for how many like underrated movies you've reclaimed, and that should be like kind of your status symbol of like, damn, everyone used to hate Miami Vice, but David logged it as a 5 out of 5 in 2008, so that should count for something.
Did you? Wait, was Letterboxd didn't exist in 2008? That's
I don't
just
think Letterboxd existed then. Just a theoretical.
Good. So today we're chatting about Twisters, the adaptation, not adaptation movie. And I just want to start that off by saying, David, you might already know this, but for the listeners/viewers, the director, whose name is Lee Isaac Chung, he very heavily verified that this movie is not a sequel, it's not a prequel, it's not a remake, it's purely like a reimagining of just the idea of the story. Which honestly sounds ridiculous. And like when you're first getting into the trailers and being like, oh yeah, they're making a new Twister movie, you're kind of like, it's not a new Twister movie, but it is. I don't know, but I feel like I personally applaud that. I applaud the fact that they're like, yeah, it's our own fucking thing. We're just using the IP to get an audience, but it's going to be fresh. So.
Yeah, totally. I think like that's I'm more likely to go see a sequel if it's something like a franchise like Twisters rather than like something Marvel at this point, because with Twisters like homie might actually be able to do what he wants, whereas like there's, if you're making the next Avenger, there you have to go up against like the Marvel firing squad with every decision you make. You just have there's too much lineage there, and the fans are too toxic to like really do what you want. And like the executives know that, and they don't let directors do anything. So I'm definitely like was excited to go see this one, even though people might have just been like unimpressed because it was just like a sequel or whatever. The first thing I really liked was it felt like they approached the cultural aspect of the movie in a way that felt very modern. Again, I haven't seen the first one, but it felt like they one of the first times in a while that like a big Hollywood blockbuster kind of has their finger on the pulse a little more than usual. Like it just in terms of like, even though it really doesn't go too deep into anything, it just like in terms of having the dynamic of like there are these like elites, someone who is seen as like some city girl, is coming from out of town with her PhD and her big fancy like science machines. And there's like the dude from the Midwest who's
Science
just like all about
machines.
like the redneck ingenuity, and so I definitely, I really appreciated that right off the bat.
Yeah. Okay. So that actually leads me into my first question for you, David, because previously you and I have had strikingly different opinions on the films that we've discussed on this podcast. And I just want to ask you first and foremost with Twisters, with this movie that we're talking about today, did you
Mhm.
love it or did you love it?
You know what? I loved it. 10 out of 10. Wouldn't change a thing.
Good. You better have, because I think honestly, like, it still kind of gets to me that you didn't love Cocaine Bear, and I know that someday you'll rewatch it. Someday you will, but I'm glad that you like Twisters because I feel like this is one of those movies that it's just so widely appealingly fun that it's like
Yeah.
we can pick it apart and we can get into, which we will. I mean, we're gonna pick it apart and get
Yeah.
into like the nitty gritty stuff. But overall, I went into that theater being like, I want to see a movie that's fun. I want to have a good time. And then I left that theater and I was like, that was fun. And I had a good time. And that's exactly what I needed. And that's like perfect film as far as it gave you what you wanted, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really, really appreciated this movie because I felt like I did enjoy it. I did have a good time, and it's nice to be able to relate to everyone in that way, whereas like you see a movie like Cocaine Bear and everyone's like talking about, well, at least it's fun. And I'm like, that actually was really unfun for me. That was terrible. I really didn't appreciate my time. But this was
Well,
good. This was cool. This was like a good reason to go out to the movies.
yeah, hell yeah. And so, okay, let's start with our first like real official question. We always start off with a favorite quote. And I'm notoriously getting worse and worse at finding like a unique, interesting favorite quote, and I kind of don't care. Um, but let me first ask you, what's your favorite quote in this movie?
Mine was like, this might have been the biggest laugh line for me was when Javi and his team, they've kind of separated from, is it Katie, Daisy Edgar Jones' character? I think that's her name.
Kate.
When they
Yeah.
like see Kate, when they see Kate with, I'm just gonna call all of them by the actor names. When they see
Anthony
Daisy
Ramos
Edgar
and
Jones
Glenn
with Glenn
Powell. Yeah,
Powell
yeah, yeah.
in the car, and they're like, it looks like they're like going straight to the city, whereas like Javi and his boys are like still like dialed in on the mission. And his like right hand crony, the one who's kind of been a hater the whole time, he just like whips his head and looks at them and he's like, "See, I told you we didn't need her." And that
Yeah.
just like killed me. That was like
Uh,
so like on par with his character. He was just like had such a little attitude about everything. He was just sitting there like, the whole time. I
Yeah.
love that.
You know
That's
that
like the
that
one.
guy got like A minuses straight through high school and college and like it will never leave him. You know,
Oh yeah.
it's that kind of person who like you did good on paper, but also not as good as you wanted to. You know, so you're gonna be like angry and bitter about it the rest of your life. That same kind of person who's like, oh, I know this is not quite the same, but like in the same realm of the people who are like they love Lord of the Rings or whatever it is. And they're like, yeah, I need to know every single detail about it. And every time I talk about it, I need to bring up every single detail about it because I don't know. Like, I don't know. What am I
It
saying? Like, incels, basically? Is
it's the kind of guy you can't crack a beer with.
Yeah. Well said. Well
Sometimes you
said.
just need to like let loose a little bit, pal. We're gonna get at least a couple tornadoes. It seems like we got like 4 or 5 of them a day here in Oklahoma. So just take a chill pill, man. Like it's all gonna be
Yes,
okay.
so many tornadoes. Okay, actually, that's something I want to talk about. I feel like personally for me, and let me kind of like bring this up as, I'll throw my opinion out there and I ask you for your opinion. And if you don't 100% agree with you, I get mad at you. So here, let's go with this. So, um, The amount of tornadoes that they had, the amount of tornadoes that they had, and the scale of tornadoes that they had, and the types of tornadoes that they had, I personally thought was like kind of the perfect balance in a way. It was like we got a ton of tornadoes, but we didn't get so many that it was like, okay, calm down, you know. And we got cool
Right.
things like double tornado, like twin nados and fire
Yeah.
nados, and that was fun. But we didn't like jump the shark further and get like
Yeah.
Sharknado or anything like super crazy to like bring us out of the story. I think we got a really good balance of like this is crazy, this is fun, this is realistic enough, but not like insane in either direction or like also not lacking. I was like, okay, good.
Yeah.
I need tornadoes. If you're going to make a Twisters movie, I need like at least 4 good tornadoes.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I'm surprised I didn't think about Sharknado when I was watching it because that's the obvious like connection or similar film. But I was actually thinking about Armageddon in terms of like a movie that's like
Ooh.
about science that like the whole time I was like,
Okay.
how close is this gonna get to like that level of ridiculousness? And this definitely towed a much more like what the average person might say like respectable line of like, yeah, it was like maybe a little ridiculous, but it wasn't pronouncing itself too much. It wasn't so ridiculous that you were like, come on, 20
Yeah.
tornadoes in a row, they did a good job about like keeping it
Yeah.
grounded while still like giving it that Hollywood magic. It doesn't all like make entirely sense, but it works nonetheless.
Yeah, even when there was like the double tornadoes and that kind of thing, there were moments where like one of them phased out. So it wasn't like, oh,
Yeah.
we have two and they're incredible and they keep going. And even with the fire NATO, it was like it was only a fire NATO for a certain amount of time. It didn't like super blow up and like destroy the whole world. Again, it kind of
Yeah.
I think the filmmakers did a really good job at balancing like we want this to be crazy and fun and action packed, but at the same time like they know their limit. And I thought that was great, very well done.
Yeah, the director, what he does very well is like all those visual moments. It was like such a great visual movie, and that's exactly what it needed to be. And like it shouldn't be understated just the fact that like everything in this movie had the appropriate like physics to it, and that could get really tough when you're doing CGI. But there was
Mhm.
actually like the proper stakes where like everything had weight. It like literally had weight, and so like you believed in the tornadoes, you believed when like someone was in danger, and he did a good job at
Believed
directing
in the
like some of the
tornadoes.
you gotta
That's
that's
so
like rule number
cute.
one about
You
Twisters, you
gotta
gotta
believe.
believe.
True. So true.
I believe.
I believe. I believe
People try to say that
wholeheartedly.
movie is fake. I'm not buying it.
Every single one of those, actually, this is a fact. This is a fact that I want to bring to the podcast. Every single one of those tornadoes was real and was fully shot in real time. Yeah, I don't know if you knew that.
Whoa.
No,
They're
but the
like
cool
the
thing is but the cool thing is, each of the tornadoes were like the way that they did the effects was layered, but each of the tornadoes was based on a real tornado. Like, I know that sounds kind of silly. The tornadoes themselves were more of an adaptation than the actual whole story of the film, which is kind of fun. Um, but yeah, so they like literally took influence from the sort of wreckage that those even created. Like some real life tornado wrecked trees were even used for like production design and greens and that kind of thing, which is crazy and kind of like the coolest version of recycling that I've ever seen in a film. So props
yeah.
to them, the people who did that,
Yeah.
which I believe would be just production design and greens. I
Yeah.
didn't look up their names, but IMDb is free. So
Let me ask you a question, Kim.
do it.
Do you believe in global warming?
Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up. Do I believe? Okay, do you want to ask me like personally as a person? Do you want me to like put that out publicly in the world? Yes, of course I believe in climate change. We've known this for decades. It's crazy that people. It's like the same people who deny climate change are kind of like close to flat earthers at this point. Where I'm like, dude, we've known this. We've known this for decades. Um, anyways, yes, I believe in climate change. Does Twisters believe in climate change? Is kind of the question because I think there's this whole element, and you might have wanted to bring this up, but there's this whole element of like the film is kind of slightly based on some of the effects of climate change, but they never talk about it directly. And so, specifically, the filmmakers are like, we don't want to talk about it directly. We don't want this to be something that is pointed at climate change. And I kind of think, like, the first time I heard that, the first time I watched this film and kind of like that part soaked in, that they were like not denying, but like not directly chatting about climate change, I was a little bit like, okay, guys, come on. But I don't know. I guess how do you feel about that? Because I kind of think that ultimately that was the right choice for this film, for the story, and also for its demographic.
Yeah, totally. I think that no matter what, that they state their opinions, in like the things that they include and the things that they don't include. And like there's maybe the best example is like at the end when they're all in the movie theater, spoiler alert, and like
This
they're
whole thing is a
watching a
spoiler.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. They're watching a movie and the screen, like, quickly it's demolished and it gives way to the actual hurricane that's there. And I thought that that was like a very potent metaphor about the film and how like they were saying, yeah, like the second this movie is over, you look outside and you actually do see some of the things that are being depicted on the screen, and these are like very much like real life horrors. I do think like it was really good that they avoided preaching to people because even though like climate change is maybe one of the like big issues in our world that I'm like more passionate about, I do feel like Hollywood has totally like miss they've missed the pulse on like where our culture is at. And I do think
Mhm.
they've just done a lot of preaching in the past about other things that people aren't down for. And at a certain point it's kind of like I think it's powerful to like show that these effects that are happening, they do give lip service to the fact that like seems like there's more of these than there usually are. Seems like they're worse than it brings
They
to light the issue
dance
and it
around it.
allows people to come to their own conclusions because it and as much as like climate change is obviously super real, there's so much science that needs to be done as to like what we can do to change that. I think we live in a world where like a lot of our the bureaucrats is at least in our country, their way of solving climate change or addressing it is by like giving grants to electric vehicle companies. So like i
It's like the
i, I
number
don't want
one.
them
Yeah.
to go on about that because I don't believe in that. So I'm glad that they just were like, this is the issue, and like we'll leave it up to you to like kind of figure it out yourself, I guess.
Yeah. 100%. And not to like super dive into the electric vehicles of it all.
No, go
But
there.
there is an aspect too where electric vehicles are not quite all they're hyped up to be. And that's not to say that they are
No.
bad and they are not still kind of a better option in many ways, but I don't know. I guess we're not talking about that right now, and I don't want to like bring my hot take on that, even though I kind of just did. That's my hot take. Anyways,
Yeah.
Twisters, but yeah, I completely agree with you. I think they danced around it in a way that is like, again, they weren't denying it outright. They weren't super putting it up there. I think they did it in a way that's like, honestly, what we kind of need to do more of as like a society in general is sometimes there are these terms that just are so heavily charged, like emotionally charged
Yeah.
terms. Climate change is a very emotionally charged term for a lot of people. And it can cause, like, the second we start talking about that, it can cause a lot of people to be like, I'm done, I'm out. Like if they
Yeah.
don't quite prescribe to the thought process. However, at the same time, a lot of these terms that are very emotionally, politically charged, a lot of us agree on up until you say the words, you know? It's
Yeah.
kind of like we've been so conditioned on whatever sort of political side of the spectrum you're on. It's like we've been so conditioned to react strongly to these hot button words that it's like once you take those away for a second, once you just have like an open discussion with someone, or in this case, it's like a story, right? You have this story, you're telling someone, you can say it in a way where it's like you're not saying the words that have been um like Pavloved into this hot button reaction, but you're having just a basic discussion. Does that make any sense? I'm not sure how I'm wording this,
Absolutely.
but it's like
That's
there's
the
so many
that's the power
things.
of art. Like
Yeah.
like you don't like have to directly like say something to an audience for them to get it. And like it's
Mhm.
definitely a lot of other filmmakers have come to the conclusion that a point is more powerfully made if you come at it indirectly. And like if you give like people like two elements that they can, when you juxtapose them together, they figure out what meaning they take from that, and that's like if you sit there and start like, I mean, if you start preaching to me about something, I might assume that you don't really know what you're talking about, and I think when it comes to like something like climate change, a lot of what gets in the way of the conversation is there's just extremists on both sides. And like,
Mhm.
unfortunately, the second you become like extremist about things, people react in the wrong direction. And so, I guess like I thought it was really interesting whether they intended for this to be a point or not. Like in the film, it was interesting that the only people doing like real research to figure out this problem are like random people, and random people
Mhm.
with a YouTube channel, or like very shady organizations. I definitely like thought it was
Yeah.
an appropriate like
Mhm.
way to depict scientists in this day and age. Like who it's like literally like you are like a YouTuber with a Patreon or something, or you're like working for some defense company, and that's who's paying
Mhm.
you to do your research. Even if it's good research, you're doing it for bad purposes. So I thought that was like super base that they included that depiction of life.
Yeah, and a very classic and just constant story that is, again, relatable to all because we all know it. There are, businesses will be taking advantage of people for money. That's just unfortunately the way that our world and our nation works. And that is a huge part of the problem of everything. And it happens to all of us. And I think we all, again, know it so deeply. And it's just, again, it's an age old story. There's like, I mean, it's just a constant trope of like, big bad realtor man comes in and like commits fraud. I don't know.
It
Maybe not commits fraud,
it
but like
kind of
there's
is
always
like a
like guy in
Hallmark
suit
movie.
is bad guy because he's taking advantage of people for money. Like that's such a constant character because it's a constant character in life. And so we see that now and it is kind of again this way that we're talking about to sort of bridge the gap between pieces of this film's demographic that could theoretically be a lot more divided and yet at the same time are more united by this. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, well, totally, and that goes back to my point about this movie understanding like the cultural moment in America a little better than others, where like I feel like just past like Hollywood blockbuster movies in recent years just feel so elitist and so out of touch with like just
Mhm.
base like desires and what like your average person's view of America is going to be, where like like a movie like Black Panther where they're like the Martin Freeman characters like they're like friends with like the CIA agent who's like helping them. It's like what?
Yeah.
Why? Like why is
Yeah.
this like who wants that? Like I so that to me I just see so many examples of them just missing the mark, and it's like my girlfriend made a great point that this is kind of like a Hallmark movie, but in a way it's like
Well, it
that's
is
so
because
valid.
it's like country boy comes in and like teaches our city girl like the meaning of Christmas. Except this movie is country boy comes in and teaches our city girl main character the meaning of tornado. That's what this movie is. It's a Hallmark movie, and it's so fun and it's so classic. It's an age old story just told kind
Yeah.
of differently with more humanized characters, more modern characters.
Yeah, and think about how much like weight Glenn Powell's overacting pulls in this movie. Like he's such a ham, and it
Unquestionably.
works. But he's so shamelessly a ham, and like I don't know, just you need that kind of bravado in a movie like this. And I guess like if I'm to think about casting, the one thing I kind of wished was that the actor who played Javi was a little more of like Chad tier overacting Glenn Powell type to kind of like mirror him a little bit and
Combat
be a
it.
little bit more like competitive. I felt like
Yeah.
that other actor, Javi, was like a little deflated. I understand that's why he was trying to play it, but it just didn't feel like it was doing anything for me. If anything, like you just needed more people like with that big energy, because it is kind of a ridiculous idea.
I could see that, yeah. I think it would have definitely added a little bit extra depth to it, but I do still like the way that Anthony Ramos played it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because even like that character, I think there were times where I got mad at his character, and I feel like I don't know how to put this. Okay. let me just talk about his character for a second. So
Yeah,
he's like the clearly like the best friend who's in love with her, and we already know we're like that's not going to happen. We know that she's
yeah,
going to fall in love with Glenn Powell. We know that that's how the movie's going to go. Um, but I think just the progress, like we never got a moment where Anthony's character was like a huge piece of shit. He was just like a misguided piece of shit, if that makes
yeah,
sense. He was like working for the wrong people and like kind of having some of the wrong concepts, but like again in more of a misguided way and not like a oh my god you don't love me I'm going to ruin your life kind of way. Like he was still I still
yeah,
clung to him even when I was like yeah you're making bad decisions and I hope you learn from them, but I'm ready for you to learn from them, kind of thing. Whereas I think there are some films with this type of character where you can have that character and then he again pulls that sort of move where he's like, "You don't love me, I'm gonna make your life a living hell," and then it's like, "Well, you're just
yeah,
I don't like you anymore, like you're gone."
yeah,
But I think his character was a lot more just good and realistic and like better fleshed out than that, and that's
yeah,
kind of an overall note that I personally have about this movie is yes, it's cheesy. It's overdone. It's like a very, again, classic story, cut and dry. We kind of know how the big points are going to hit, how the big plot points are going to unravel. And yet at the same time, it's just done so well and it's so fun. And it is, like you're saying as well, so aware of where it is in our like political atmosphere and then just our
yeah.
cultural atmosphere to come into it and make this like a really good movie and not just like a pumped out nothingness.
Yeah, yeah, I really liked it. I do feel like the characters are well drawn. You know, there could have been, you know, maybe there's some room for like, just if I was to direct it, you know, I always like to think in that way. Like, I always would want to go like a little more felt, even, you know, like make the stakes somehow even higher on a personal level, you know, or it's like I also just think sometimes when you think of like climate disasters or something, like it'd be interesting to like, it's a very scary movie, but it'd be interesting to play more into like the horror genre in a similar type of movie at some point, you know. And that's just
Mhm.
not to detract from the movie, but just to spitball like different ways that it could have gone. um but what was I going to say? There's something else I was going to say that I just forgot. um
Needed more
anyway,
cocaine.
more
That the
cocaine, more like
movie needed
Cocaine
more
Bear.
cocaine. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Cocaine
needed more cocaine.
Sharknado. Wait.
Yes.
Elizabeth Banks, if you're listening to this, I know you are, obviously. Hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Please,
Cocaine Sharknado,
please. Come on. We've all
soft
been waiting
pitch.
for it.
We've all
Oh,
been
my
everyone online is saying it.
I remembered what I was gonna say, and like, as much as I like it, you know, when I watch a movie like this, what I can't help but forget is like, or just I can't look past is the Spielberg influence. So like, obviously Spielberg
Yes.
was he
Yeah.
was just an EP. You know, I don't know how much like say he had in this movie. I'm sure he cares. I'm sure he had some impact. And obviously Spielberg didn't make the original one, but it's been a pretty common trend you've seen. You know, people have been influenced by Spielberg since he came out, but especially like
Spielberg
this
came out.
last
Congratulations. I'm sorry.
yeah.
It was right there. It was lined up.
The
Um
scarves say it
yeah,
all. He
we'll
doesn't
wait.
have
We'll
to
keep
come
waiting
out.
for him.
His
Yeah.
layering skills are way too good. But yeah, he you know, especially like since like all these big studio directors since like JJ Abrams, like you could tell their biggest influence, whether or not they even recognize it, is Spielberg, you know, because partially it's because he just invented this type of blockbuster that we like to watch, you know. And George Lucas has a big hand in that with like something like Indiana Jones, you know. A movie like this
Mm.
is exactly like that. It definitely was built around like a series of big like tornado plot points, and they kind of fit everything to kind of like, you know, a story that kind of works with that. And so I always like to consider their influences and just kind of think of, you know, what this movie might have been missing from if someone like Spielberg did do it, you know, because I again, to
Oh,
mention
like a
JJ.
14-year-old child who loves tornadoes. I mean, like it's just very Spielberg to have like an innocent child character. Jurassic Park, all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
E.T. I feel like if I'm sorry, I'm so like just like
yeah,
stealing your thing and like going off, but I feel like if this movie were written, produced, and or directed by Spielberg, there would have been some kid who's like, I want to chase tornadoes too. And it would have been like Glenn Powell's super younger brother or something, and like,
Yeah.
they would have kept him away from the tornadoes, but one time he would have like slipped in, and they would have had to
Yeah.
protect him, and there would have been that whole element too. But and of
You
course we
know,
would have
as
opened up with like a super long one shot, which is just has become over the years like a signature of Spielberg.
Yeah, well, all of that, you make a great point. I hate annoying kid actors as much as the next person. But what I will say is, like, if you look at, let's say, Jurassic Park, the point isn't just to have a kid character. The point is to have a kid character whom the adult, like, doesn't like. Like, there's, like, an inherent friction that Spielberg is always playing with, like, these, like, inter-family issues that, like, kind of sometimes when you get down to it, like, in some movies he depicts it in a more tame way, but in other movies, like, it's kind of fucked up. Like, and
Mhm.
especially when you see a movie like The Fablemans, there's real like genuine like hurt that he has from his family dynamics growing up, and throughout making some of the most entertaining fun movies of all time, he has included these like very real like character conflicts, like usually within a family, that I think heighten the excitement. They heighten like the drama and everything like that, and so that's
And
definitely
just adds
something that
another
I
kind of viewpoint to it as well, because again,
yeah.
including children as any sort of main character, you add that as a viewpoint to a certain extent. Stranger Things is a good example because it's kind of likened with some Spielberg work. It's not Spielberg is not involved in Stranger Things, but it's very clearly there's an inspiration there as well. And
Oh yeah.
to have these kids be the main characters, you get that viewpoint of like when you were sort of that age and had that mindset of like, yeah, there's Demogorgon. I'm not going to tell my mom. I'm going to go run away from school and attack it. Versus like, it would be such a different viewpoint of an adult. And I think that just kind of, not to dive too much into the Spielberg of it. I mean, there's so many people
Yeah.
who analyze his storytelling techniques, but that different viewpoint ultimately, tries to give you more of like an innocent outlook on more of things, on more of like a what am I trying to say? Also, just more of like a morally sound viewpoint in many ways. I feel like when you're a kid, there's a lot of you that is more morally black and white, and therefore, in some ways, more able to lean towards the light side, so to speak. Whereas adulthood, you kind of realize more things are grayed out and complicated. And the negative of that is it does allow you to sort of fluctuate harder in either direction, to kind of like excuse yourself for doing wrong or vice versa. Does that make sense the way I said it? It's like that kind of is
Absolutely.
part of the viewpoint change on having children be a main character in your story versus not, is like you've got that different viewpoint and that feeds into your story and your morals in a different way.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And just to go even further, like, not to take this movie to task, it's more of like a comment on studio filmmaking in general, but it's like, that is usually the element that is wiped out of the story. And like those are kind of like the rough edges that, make things interesting. And Spielberg has said, before, like, and a lot of people have echoed similar comments, like every story should include like high comedic moments and like very low tragic moments. And this is like a movie that does feel like it doesn't contain like, it doesn't get too deep or dark with the character, and that's fine. Maybe that director just didn't want to go there or something, I don't know. But I always feel like, if you risk a little bit more with like the stakes of the character, and if you could ground it a little more in their story, then it could make the movie sing, and this might be more
Hmm.
similar to like Indiana Jones, where Indiana Jones is very much like a character, not to say he's not well rounded, but he's very like static all the way through, at least he's unchanging. He's a very made man, he's very, very sure of himself, but like still it feels like there's some more like conflicts there within himself, and obviously there's some of that with Daisy Edgar Jones's character in this one, but I don't know. I felt like there could have been more. I felt like there could have been, something about like. I was just gonna say one last thing about families is, yeah, some part of why I think a movie like Hereditary is so powerful is because of it's like the family unit. There's something about like having stress with like a friend or some lover that we don't know, that's like one thing. But then when it's a family unit where like you cannot break out of this no matter what, like this is who you got, like there's something that's very like damning and potentially like giving like a trapping feeling to it. And so that's just, I think an interesting angle to look at this.
Okay. Yeah. I was gonna ask, do you think then if she needed like a little extra uh depth in that way that you're saying, do you think maybe if instead of losing three friends to a dangerous, horrible, terrible tornado, that maybe four would have done the trick for you? You think four would have just
You
really
know
sealed the
what?
deal? You're
Or
like,
or
that's
if like
sad. Three, sure. Four,
I actually
that's fucking sad.
the body count was not nearly high enough in this movie for me. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding. I think like, and again, not to like try and like edit this person's movie too much, but like if the one of her friends in the beginning was her sister and like her mother was actually fucking devastated about that, like, and the mother played a little more of a role of like reminding her the dangers of things rather than just being like, you're not quitting. I don't know. You could have squeezed a little more juice dramatically out of that. But they weren't really going for that.
I think we could have
But
gotten that even from Glenn Powell's character. We could have gotten like a quick little flashback of uh, him losing someone or something. I don't think we got anything like too terrible about him that I remember. I mean, we kind of just
no.
got, he's like a slightly skeezy guy that turns into like a much less skeezy guy, you know? Which also, okay, wait, no, I have to talk about that for a second because I already loved Glenn Powell. I mean, he crushed it in Maverick, and we knew that moment. We were like, yeah, this man's a star. He's going to go far. Great.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and then Twisters, like I think he really surprised me, and that's kind of crazy because I mean, we get that introduction of like this guy wears a cowboy hat and is like kind of a sassy boy kind of thing, and I was like, ugh, like I was rolling my eyes almost in the same way that like Daisy Edgar Jones's character was, but kind of in that way where I was like, we've seen this story so many times, right? And I was ready for it to be a little too predictable, or not even too predictable, but just like unearned in that way. I was ready for it to be
Yeah.
unearned because I was like, I know what's going to happen is he sort of unravels her a little bit, she unravels him a little bit, and happily ever after. But I was like, I've seen that so many times and I'm so sick of like, yeah, this guy's a little bit of a jerk and then you end up loving him. Like, I'm so sick of that trope. But this film, for some reason, I think it did really good because by the end of the film, I really liked his character. I was like, okay, man, you did it. You've actually helped her. Except for that time where like he fully stalked her to her parents' house. That time I was like, no, don't. That's crazy. That's a little crazy. Cut that out.
He's just being charming. Come on, Kim.
Yeah, he's just like, yeah, I found where you live, and also I'm right here now, and like I'm not leaving. So that part I was like, but again, that part, like, yeah, I'll attack that and I'll be like, you should have done that differently. Um, there were things like that in this film I will nitpick on and whatever, but not to be a person who like always spins it positively, but to spin it positively, I still loved the movie. I still had those moments where I was like rolling my eyes, whatever, at the dialogue or at something like that. And yet at the same time, I was like, I still am having fun. I'm still here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think something should be we should discuss like the lack of a final kiss in this movie. I think that
Should we
hits on
discuss it? I have a hot take. Go.
we
Say it.
have to, yeah. And like I totally agree with your thing about like they towed the line with these tropes very well, where they just like they avoided some of them, and that's really good. I like that the romance didn't need to be played up too much. I mean, that could have been cool. That could have been more like a Michael Mann movie, but obviously that was very different from what they were going for. However, I do, and I'm so far from the first person to say this, like, but
Yeah.
they set up the romance. They set up the obvious like connection of them at the end that like I just think it was such like a flaccid thing to like cut out the kiss or to not shoot
A
it at all. Like,
flaccid thing.
yeah,
Wow.
it's a flaccid
That's
decision to make.
I
There's nothing there. There's like why not? Like why not at least like I don't know, someone made the good point online of like they should have at least subverted it a little bit more if they weren't going to show it. Like show that there's a moment they're about to kiss and then something comes up and they get separated and yada. I know that kind of
Yeah,
happens,
she should
but
have just fully jumped his bones in the airport, and they could have had like a full 3.5 minute slow motion sex scene in the
see,
airport.
you're not being nuanced about this, Kim. I'm just talking about a peck. That's
No, but
all
I
I
mean,
needed.
okay, I get that. I kind of get that because I also did feel that a little bit, like I was waiting for the kiss moment in this, because again, it felt like the logical progression, the logical moment, and that scene where she was like, "If you feel it, chase it," and he was like, "Okay, okay," and then he was like, "Wait a minute, she means me," and then he like great moment, so fun.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we were all expecting the kiss. I personally, here's my hot take. I am okay with there not having been a kiss, and I am like now adamantly okay with them not having had a kiss, like very like vocally, like clearly I'm passionate about it right now. I'm very passionate about them not having had a kiss, also because we see that so many fucking times in movies, David. It's like
That's
everywhere
human
where they're like,
nature. That's like
male character, female
storytelling
character, and they
101.
kiss. Yeah, but I'm also like so tired of it. I'm like, just have one, and
Well,
this was
then
the one
don't
movie for
build a
me. I was like,
romance.
just have
Then
one
everyone
movie
should
where
just
they don't have to kiss.
I think everyone should just be best friends then. Like I think you shouldn't like
And why
lead me
not?
on. Like because when you include like a quasi romance and then don't do it, it's like what's the excuse besides you are like trying to be as the least bit offensive as you could possibly be, which is also like I
Well,
don't even know how this could be viewed as like offensive in any way.
I think it's
Um
like I'm gonna get deep into it, right? Because like
yeah.
I don't ultimately care about it that much, but because I'm fired up right now and I want to explain it more. I think part of the reason why I'm so adamant about this as well, and like what we're talking about is like it is such a, like, let's not lie here, okay? It is such a like male point of view, such a like patriarchal point of view, that like A plus B equals C, guy likes girl equals kiss and sex and happily ever after, right? Which like is a very black and white of the world. The world is more complicated than that. The world is not so cut and dry as that, and there are times where it is that, there are times where it isn't that. And I think it's like this feeds so like this whole kind of concept of like guy character likes girl character, they kiss and have happily ever after, is such like an obnoxious, again, very like just patriarchal thing where it's like, yes, it must happen next, this must happen because they love each other, therefore this will happen next. And it's kind of annoying because then it like, I don't know. In the real world, I feel like that sort of makes it feel like there's this constant weight of like, if you are in real life in a situation where like you like a guy, it feels like now you're just so drawn into, well, I have to, like, the next thing that I must do is to kiss this man. Where like sometimes you want to kiss him, sometimes you don't want to kiss him, sometimes you got garlic breath, sometimes you're okay with garlic breath. Like the world is complicated. And I think I just get so mad when we um reinforce this like constant formulaicness of romance where it's like A plus B equals C, like, and so on and so forth, like step one, step two, step three, where it's like it's not that in the real world. So I know this is like, I'm so ranting about this, but I'm so tired of it being like, this must happen next, this must happen next. And so for this movie to be like, we know that they get together, we know that they like each other, we know that this is a thing, we know that they're, together, we don't have to have a kiss. We know it. Every other movie on the planet has a kiss. Every other movie that even doesn't need a kiss has a kiss. Star Wars episode 9, they did not need a kiss. Rey and Ben Solo did not need to get
Are
together,
you
and we all know
scared?
that.
I don't. Okay, okay.
I'm
Well,
just
I just
so
have to
mad. Go
say,
ahead, go ahead.
I like, with all due respect, like, I appreciate your opinion, but I do think you're applying a little bit of your own neuroses onto this because I don't think there's
What?
that much pressure. Because Kim, I'm not saying they should kiss because, well, that's the male star and that's the female star. They've built a whole relationship for the whole movie. Like, that everything you do in a story is intentional. And it's a classic storytelling move to have two characters start out in some amount of opposition, and over time they get to know it and like each other a little bit more. And again, like, I think the first thing I would say is like kind of what I said before is, if you want them to have, like, you're talking about all the nuances of like, should I kiss this person or not? I think that would have been great to include. they have some sort of romance, but
That's
like
fair. Yeah.
there's some sort of like cheeky way out of it of like, hey, we want to dodge this trope, but like it just only makes sense that like, if and I guess my other point is the kiss is great because that's like visual storytelling. Like I
And
could sit there and
it
have
is the
two characters
moment.
like
Yeah.
say they love each other, but that is like such like a beautiful like, and if it's earned, like it could be really sincere and sweet. And then I also want to say that that's not a patriarchal thing. I would be saying the exact same thing no matter what race or gender these people were. Like it's just a matter of love, and I think like love, like people go to see movies because of love. That's why people go and see rom-coms, is like I want to put myself in the head of those characters and like imagine myself in this extremely beautiful grand romantic situation, no matter who they are. And like I do think like cinema is a matter of like, sometimes in some artistic ways people like to withhold what is expected. People like to subvert expectations, and that's cool. But
Mhm.
sometimes if you're making like this movie is, to be fair, not that. It is like a crowd pleaser. Let's throw everything
Yeah.
up at the screen and give people a classic story. And so I think when you build up all of that and then you just like have the most flat ending ever, like you miss the opportunity. Or at least,
You
like
know
I
what would have been
said, you miss the
good?
opportunity to intentionally subvert it.
Yeah. Okay. So on that, you know what would have been fun and kind of like fit a
Yeah.
little bit of what you're saying and a little bit of what I'm saying is it would have been funny if they had like a they go in for the kiss and it's like we get that close up of like their heads close together and like right in between their heads in the background like through the windows of that airport we see like lightning strike and they like look towards it as if like oh my god there's another storm coming or I don't know something like that but
Yeah.
that like
Yeah,
any
that
sort of
would that
like
would be like so
that would have been
in the
funny.
correct tone. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be like every single person would be like, like that's good,
Like, oh, they'll get him next time. They'll keep chasing the storms
Yeah.
and chasing each other until there's nothing left. That should have been the tagline.
Yeah. Yeah, I do just like, I do think there's I don't know. I guess like it's always interesting to think about the people's like current beliefs on like sex in cinema and like intimacy and stuff like that. Where it's like it just, I don't know. It's viewed as something that has to happen, but it I don't know. It's also just something like you look at like Top Gun Maverick and um it's like he has like
Yeah.
basically a love scene with the character, and like he doesn't kiss her, and it's like, yeah, you don't have to kiss her, but like I don't understand like why people are so afraid. I think people just know it's been overused, and like there have been plenty of sex scenes and kissing scenes that didn't feel necessary, but it shouldn't get in the way of like, maybe sometimes it is necessary, even if it's not like it, pushing the plot along. It's like it is expressing something about the characters.
It
So
would have been
yeah,
good.
I would have
Like
loved to
not
see a
to I
little
do
more
have the hot take,
steaminess.
but it would have been good. It would have been a punctuating moment. And honestly, if that movie would
Yeah,
have had a kiss scene or even like, something that I'm describing where it was again that subversion we're talking about, if it would have had either of those, I still would have been happy enough with the movie and probably wouldn't have complained about it at all. I
right,
think
right.
I'll admit it, right? I'll admit it. A little bit of what you said earlier. Yes, I'm probably projecting a little bit of my own real world issues and stuff into this. And also just I'm still mad about the kiss between Ray and Ben Solo slash Kylo Ren. I will always, always be mad about that.
Yeah.
I think I should always be mad about that. If I'm not
If
mad
you
about
see
that,
JJ,
I'm
let
a
him
clone of
know.
myself and I'm not real and I'm dead. I'll let him know.
That's
I
good
think I
enough.
saw him
Damn.
one time.
I mean, Kim, if it's like, and I'm really just like arguing bare minimum. If I made this movie, it would have been like there would have been a montage between two people like starting to get it on with a tornado developing, and you would have played up that whole visual metaphor. But
Oh my god.
maybe,
Imagine they're like in the barn,
yeah,
right? And they're like getting close and they're like there's got to be a pile of hay, right? And they like start going in the pile of hay and then like the winds are kicking up outside and it's kind of a little bit adding to the tension and like, we like hear the
yeah,
sounds and have the like all of that and it's like getting really hot and heavy. And then well wait, no, this wouldn't work. My brain just could like mesh two scenes together, but I was like they have sheets on top of them for some reason in this thing that I just immediately imagined. They have sheets on top of them in the barn on this stack of hay, and they're getting it on. And then the door whips open because it's not closed properly. It doesn't have good weathering, and the winds literally rip away the sheets, and that's like, I don't know what I'm saying. Ignore.
No,
I'm
that
gonna
would have
cut all
been
of this out. I don't
so
know.
good. Would have been
I
so
need time to
sick.
edit
Like
this. I need time to edit my. That's what I do in writing. If I could
that's a
like work
great
on this,
idea.
it's either the sheets ripped off by the winds, or it's they're in the barn and they get hot and heavy, and the door gets ripped
Yeah.
off, and then they gotta
and
go
and I'm
chase.
biased because like I just think like one of the most important elements of a story and life is like the people, the relationships, and like where love is being threatened versus strengthened. So like in my mind, I just think like that's where I go. Like I'm really dialed in on like what's the relationship between these two characters here. So that's something I particularly care about. But I do appreciate your perspective, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, you know me. I'm always down for a hot take that may or may not mean well.
We
May or may
gotta
not
have
be a
them.
projection of my own
That's what you get
problems
paid the
with
big bucks
society.
for.
Yeah, that's why I get paid. That's why I pay myself the big bucks. That's what I'm talking about.
I was no, I probably what you're gonna say. I was gonna ask if you said your favorite line yet.
Oh, I didn't. No. Oh my god. Okay. See, so my favorite line. I tried not to. This is like the line of the film, but my favorite quote is "If you feel it, chase it," because it's
Oh
so
yeah,
good. It's so.
yeah,
It pertains to tornadoes. It pertains to love. It pertains to like any like passion and
ambition.
anything in
Yeah,
general, ambition, all of it, and it's just like it's a good line, and it's like this is so dumb. I would for sure get that tattooed on my body. I will debate it. I probably won't end up actually doing that, but this is the kind of quote that
yeah.
I would probably get tattooed on my body with like a little
Hell
tornado.
yeah.
Like a
I would totally, if I was in a group of people, peer pressure you into doing that for sure.
for sure, yeah. The next time that we are in a group of people and we're getting drunk and all of us are like, let's drunkenly get tattoos, that's the one that I'll get.
That's the one for sure.
Yeah. Don't tempt me because I probably will do that.
Yeah,
Um, so one cool thing I did want to mention is this film was shot on film, 35 millimeter Kodak. Hell yeah. But for like kind of the weirdest reason, and I want to talk about this and I want to get your thoughts on it. But again, I also want to get your thoughts after I've given you my thoughts and have established that those are the correct thoughts, right? So for this one, they shot on film. Love that. I think the reasoning kind of bothers me because the DP Dan Mendel, who also directed some of it,
Hmm.
um, he was talking about how he was like, yeah, there's a whole quote I have here. Okay. He says, shooting on film gives you so much more control because of the lack of absolute clarity that you have. The fact that the resolution at its best is going to be like 4K or 2.9K is low compared to most digital cameras. That allows us a lot of wiggle room in how these effects sit in the film frame. It allows us to dumb down to a certain extent the visual effects because they don't have to resolve so well. So he talks about how like part of his decision making for shooting on 35 millimeter film was that it just gives you more wiggle room. Like it like dumbs it down. It makes it like it's almost like putting a filter on the frame, or
Yeah,
you know, saying, "Oh yeah, just look at this in a distance and like squint a little bit," which I think is
yeah,
kind of I don't know. I still like this movie was great, and I don't have anything negative to say about the look of it. I think the look of it was great. It got the story along and it was fun and it was well done. But I think maybe just the way that I don't know. It bothers me a
yeah.
little.
Totally. Well, I think film was the appropriate tool to use for a film like this because of it's alive, it's not dead like digital is, which can be good for certain things, but there's something uncanny about like a digital image, and I think with this film it's just so much more appropriate to shoot on film. And I mean, I partially maybe like he's not saying this, but like I something tangential I know that people doing VFX always worry about is like if you can add imperfections to the image, it can distract from a visual effect. Like a lens flare. If you add a lens flare into a shot with a big visual effect, it
Mm,
can distract. Any like artifacts in the image help it just feel more real. So like that makes sense. Like as to like why you would use film on a VFX movie like that, or to go for the film look because you're like we want the image to just feel raw and authentic and maybe a little bit dirty. As far as like the resolution scaling goes, I guess it's like it's weird because it just feels like you could just do that in digital. You know, you could just say, "Hey, we're shooting 6K, but we're scaling it down." But I don't.
Yeah.
Part of me feels like he's not saying what he thinks he's saying, and he's talking. He's more just
That's
commenting
maybe where it
on like
is.
the fact that like digital, no matter what, is so sharp and so high res, and he just didn't want it to be so sharp and so high res.
Yeah. I'd like that more. I think maybe you're right. It is
Yeah,
kind of just like I'm getting bogged down by like the specific semantics of what he was saying rather than like I can kind of feel the heart of it is more in line with like most of the reason why people shoot on film nowadays is because it sort of does romanticize in a way and it does add a little extra layer of realism in that way of like there is
yeah.
imperfections, there is blurriness, whatever. Not blurriness, but yeah. Terms, film terms. I work in the industry.
Film
I know things.
terms.
Camera. 16 by 9. So I guess what I'm saying is they shot on film and that's cool.
Good for them. Homie
Good for
was
them.
home. He was stumbling. He didn't know what to say. The real answer was like he did the season 1 of The Mandalorian, and it made him want to kill himself. And he was like, let's go back to some OG stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I'm assuming is the reason here. But he was like, I would love to just
Yeah.
shoot like a field, like a real field with like real actors,
Yeah.
and like
If you
shoot
shoot
a
it, they
scene
will
where
come.
someone walks into scene, and I'm not worried about shooting the edge of the LED wall. He was probably really excited about
Ooh, don't get me started on LED walls.
that.
Love them, hate them. But I feel like that's with most tools in the digital age of the industry. There's such a love-hate
Yeah,
relationship, and it's ultimately coming to a point of realizing how you as an artist are going to use that as a tool or whether or not you're going to use that for the story at hand.
people distort the whole conversation because they're just extremists, you know, like Lucasfilm being like, we're gonna shoot the whole show on an LED
Mhm.
wall. It's like, all right, guys, like maybe let's like splice it in, like maybe let's use it for what it's best at, and then actually fuck off to Iceland and shoot some incredible stuff there, you know, for certain scenes. That's the issue, and
Mhm.
it's like AI is, you know, you don't even have to go all the way down that rabbit hole, but
Mhm.
it's a similar thing where it's like, sure, you could use that as a complementary tool in some cases. I'm sure there will be some use case for that, but it becomes an issue and people have a problem with it when you're like, we're just gonna do everything in the AI. It's like, all right, like chill,
Because at
like you
that
don't gotta
point,
be like that,
right. Yeah.
because no tool is that good. Like, you know, like
Mhm.
if you see a movie, you know, most movies shouldn't just be shot in a studio. They should have studio and location work. So it's like it
Mhm.
just doesn't make any sense to be such an extremist about like we're gonna have no one on set. We're just gonna do the LED wall with an AI actor. It's like chill. Like we gotta
Yeah.
find like an in between, and everyone will find a way to be happy with that.
Yeah. And even there is still an element of like there are some projects depending on how you as an artist are trying to go about it and what kind of like you want the audience to think about. You know, there could be a context in which shooting completely on an LED wall is perfect for you. Or shooting
Totally.
completely like film on location, you know, we're doing as minimal technology as possible kind of thing, like
Yeah.
natural lighting, whatever. There's a world in which that is the best option for you too. But yeah, I think you and I are still kind of saying the same thing where ultimately it is situational and it should be something that is chosen to reflect the art, but also like calm the fuck down. I think at the end of the day, that's
Yeah.
what we're saying is a film industry,
These people
calm the fuck down.
see, calm down, everybody. Papa, you need to go back to popping Xanax rather than Ozempic. It's making everyone act really weird. I'm not
Why
liking
do you
it.
always support drugs on my podcast?
And people just like, you know, obviously it's just people looking at the dollar signs being like, oh,
Yeah.
like with AI or with the LED screen, like I can get something for nothing. And it's like, you quickly
Mhm.
realize that the world is a fair place in that you cannot get something for nothing. There is no free lunch, and there is no film made entirely by a computer that doesn't suck absolute horsecock. Excuse my French. You
That
gotta
is
have the
French,
human
can
element.
confirm.
Yeah, you were there recently, so you could
I would
tell.
say.
But I'm really glad we got to talk about this again. I hate when people
Yeah.
disagree with me online, so it's really nice to have a space where I can discuss things and let everyone know my full opinion, you know.
Yeah. And I think you and I are similar too, in which we prefer, if you're gonna like super disagree with me about a film, say it to my face. Say it to my goddamn
say
face.
say it on my damn podcast.
Say to my goddamn, meet me in person, become my friend slowly throughout the years, and then allow me to invite you onto my podcast, and then you can talk about it. That's the only way that it makes sense. And on that note, David, are you ready for a movie theater butter pop quiz?
I am ready.
Stunning. This one is about tornadoes. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm super ready.
So I have in front of me, I pulled this from a website that I did not super double check. So let's hope that it's accurate. But I have in front of me um, a listing of the ratings of a tornado next to what is their, like, what is the definition of their rating. And largely when it comes to tornadoes, there's this scale. There's like the original F scale, there's the enhanced F scale, um EF and F, whatever. We're going to go by just original F. So we have the F scale, and it's F0 through 5. I'm not going to ask you all these. I'm going to ask you a random one, and you're going to get it wrong. And I'm going to tell you what the right answer is. So here we go. So there's the rating, and then it is based on what is a 3-second gust of wind. So that's in miles per hour, right? So like, I'm not saying this in a good sentence, but like a tornado is rated by a 3-second gust of its winds measured in miles per hour. There we go. I said it in words that make sense, that are science.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so are you following? Do I have to say that again? Does any of that make sense?
No, no, keep
Anyways,
going. I'm
David.
only gonna get more confused if you say it again.
Okay, so yeah, you're so right. I'm just gonna just randomly ask you out of nowhere. So an F5, which is like the sexiest tornado of them all, an F5 tornado, the one that's big bad boy. Um, what is its approximate range of a 3-second gust wind in miles per hour? Yeah, I don't know how
Approximate
to.
range.
This is not a
Wait,
good
wait. I'm
quiz.
sorry. What's the unit we're measuring in here? I don't even
Miles
know
per
that.
hour.
Is it
Miles per
miles per?
hour.
Okay, okay.
So
And you said which
winds
one? The
miles per
five?
hour. Yeah, F5. Big boy.
180 to 200.
So that's not a terrible guess. Not a terrible guess. 180 to 200 would fit in an F3 rating for a tornado. An
Oh,
F5 rating is between 262 and 317 miles per hour. Crazy
but
that you got
you
that
you
wrong.
watched the
Clearly you
original
didn't
one,
pay
right? So
attention.
you kind of yeah. It's not fair, really. If I was to ask you, you've
It's
seen
not
two
fair.
two hurricane movies at this two tornado movies. I'm forgetting
I
what
actually
what
do have a
ecological
surprising
disaster
amount
we're thinking
of
about.
knowledge in meteorology, but tornadoes is kind of still a bit of my weak spot. So I'm learning now. I will probably
Yeah.
go see the movie again. I was going to try and see it in French. I didn't. That wouldn't have helped me at all with what I'm talking about.
No, probably
The original
not.
F scale, it's actually called F because it's French. It's on a scale of French 0 tornado to French 5 tornado.
Are
And
you
that
being for
comes
real?
from, no, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm saying because I don't know how to wrap up this podcast. Okay, here's what we talk about next. So, David, how do you think this film is best watched?
I think this film is best watched on the biggest screen possible. I think watching it in a movie theater is important. So everything around you is black. You have no distractions, and you have the best audio system possible. This movie was made for the movie theaters. Should not be viewed anywhere else.
You definitely just read that off of writing it in advance, right? Which is totally fine because
No,
I give you that question
I
in
that
advance.
I'm sorry if I came off unnatural. That's literally just came off the dome. That's just something
Nice.
I would that I mean to be fair, that's kind of the standard answer I would use for all movies. But I think that's super valid.
Fair.
If
Yeah.
you could see it in one of those curved IMAX screens, that would be most ideal with a nice big buttery bucket of popcorn at your in between your legs, and a nice cherry coke
Oh,
in the
yeah.
cup holder.
Nice, buttery bowl, a buttery,
Buttery bucket of popcorn.
buttery bucket in between the
I wish
legs.
they
That's
had
what we're
hot
all
dogs
about
at
here.
AMC.
Yeah. I had a thought about that. That is not appropriate for the podcast. That's I agree with you on what you said on that's a good way that this film is best watched. I think that this film is best watched in 4DX where they, like kind of like jostle your
40X.
seat and they like sprit stuff and all that good stuff because I think this
Oh
is
yeah.
so much it's such a fun action film and I was literally saying to one of my friends I was like, "Yeah, if you go see this movie, bring one of those like Mister fans, like those spray fans with you and just like
Mm.
during like the heavy scenes just like spray yourself with water and like a little bit of air because it'll be really fun and you'll feel like you're more there and it'll be ridiculous and the people next to you are going to be like shh. um but
They're gonna be like,
4DX,
"Why are
I
you
think 4DX
making my
is fun.
popcorn wet?"
Yeah, they're like, I didn't want soggy buttery popcorn, I wanted hot buttery bucket of
Hot,
popcorn in between
steamy
my legs.
bucket of popcorn in between my legs. Oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah. And I think
Almost
another
spilled
way
my
that this
Sprite
film
at that last scene when they almost kissed. Anyway, continue.
this is getting ridiculous, David. Another way I think that this film could be best watched is specifically at like an outdoor screening, a drive-in in the back of some country boy's truck. Like when you're on,
Yeah.
a date with someone
In
that
a
you're like,
field.
it's not going to keep going, but you're like, bring your truck, let's go see Twisters in a field.
That
Yeah.
guy you're dating just because he's got the perfect vehicle for a drive-in movie.
Yeah. Well,
I know
obviously.
he's toxic, but the drive-in movies are just too good.
That's a little
He
too close
he
to
did.
home. Anyways, it's not close to home at all. I don't know what I'm saying. It's getting to that part of the episode
Country
where
Girl Kim.
Country Girl Camp. I need to learn the meaning of Christmas, David. That's why I'm on Tinder, is to learn the meaning of Christmas. The second I see someone in a cowboy hat, I'm like, you're it. Bring your truck. Let's see Twisters. Teach me the meaning of Christmas. Teach me the meaning of tornado. And on that note,
Very, very
David,
true.
let's start ending off this podcast. I want to ask
All
you, do you
right.
have any cool upcoming work you want to chat about? Or even like any upcoming movies you're excited to see? Like what do you got? What do you got going on?
Yeah, yeah, I'm extremely excited to see Megalopolis for sure. That's top of my list, especially
Yes.
as it's coming out next month now, which is almost hard to believe.
I
But
forgot
that
about
to me
that.
is like the could be movie of the year, at least in terms of like something I'm actually excited for, something I like have on my calendar, and I'm really excited to see an old school filmmaker get another shot with a huge budget and it seems like he's trying to put everything he's got on the screen and the Hollywood establishment is trying to cancel him because just like they did Orson Welles and any other visionary before him, people hate to see. Yeah, I was talking with another producer. I was talking with a producer about it. I was on a movie in May and he was like, yeah, I have a friend who saw it at con. He said it was kind of weird. He didn't like it. And I just said like I was like, yeah, well, people just don't like that he funded it himself. And that producer plus like this other producer next to me, like
Hmm.
they both just like split second were like, no. And I was like, okay, well, you guys know I'm
Then
right,
explain.
right? Like
Yeah.
that emphatic response, it makes you insecure because like this guy is just like doing something that technically is against the rules. They tell you it's against the rules. You're not allowed to put your own money on your movie. You're not allowed to bet on yourself. And yet here's someone who's doing that and is succeeding in some way. And I know
Hmm.
that definitely makes people feel insecure and is part of why Hollywood like since the start of this movie has just been saying incorrect thing after incorrect thing about him, only for every actor on this movie to come out individually and be like, "You guys need to fucking stop because you're just lying."
Yeah.
So we're gonna
Yeah.
be pulling up proud to support Coppola for that one.
Hell yeah. With a bottle of the good old wine. Director's cut.
Good
There's
point.
so Francis Ford Coppola has his own line of wine. It's been for so long. It's like a very important piece of his character as a person. I've tried two or three of those wines throughout the years. I do really like there's a director's cut
Yeah,
one where the label is a zootrope. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's
Zoetrope.
like yeah, it's like basically what was like an old style film reel kind of. Um,
Yeah,
really good wine, really good one that one. So would recommend a glass of that for the movie. I'm sure that they're going to be at several of
they
these
gotta
theaters like having his wine for sure.
they
They have
gotta
to.
he's gotta be on the phone with AMC right now. Like, please, just put the
Yeah.
fucking wine on the shelf, god damn it. Like
Yeah, they're on the other line like, "We're gonna do a box and you're gonna like it."
Yeah, we're gonna do a box that
Box
you can fuck.
wine.
How about that?
We're gonna do a Dune Part 2 box of wine.
It's literally Adam Driver's face, and you put the popcorn in his mouth.
Yeah. I would buy that.
Hey,
Great.
it sells. Those things sell. I watched a
Very
guy
true, very
like
true.
tweaking the other day because he couldn't get a popcorn bucket at AMC. Those things fucking sell.
Damn, yeah. I have a Dune popcorn bucket and I will forever be grateful. Shout out to our executive producer, Sean Alt, who got me one of the popcorn buckets because he saw that I was so excited about it. And I don't know how he found it, but I have a Dune popcorn bucket and I bring it to the theater often. And it's a very fun time.
I
Um,
love to hear that.
all right. Our final question is socials. Where can the people find you? Do you have like a public social? Do you have like a username, whatever? Discord, Instagram, Tumblr? What do
Absolutely.
you got? Who are you? Where
I
are
got it
you?
all. I got it all. You go on Instagram, David __ Cahill. That's the best place to find me and my shenanigans. If you want to see more of the
Nice.
film related stuff, the hot takes, the controversial opinions, the scandalous tweets, go follow me on X
Scandalous.
at Bergman's Boy. Yeah, you'll be shocked at what you find there.
Damn. Is that the kind of stuff I'm going to screenshot and destroy your career with in like 10 years?
Yeah, for sure. It's except it'll kind of be like a at that point it'll be too late. It'll be like baked in.
Yeah.
People will be like, "Well, there was that shocking tweet about Twisters, but he's so damn good at what he does. We just have to ignore it."
That and I think climate change is probably going to get us all by the time any of that's relevant to
Follow me on
us, you
Twitter
know?
for the rest of my views on climate change, for sure. We'll
Yeah.
get into that there.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. Appreciate chatting with you. Appreciate all your insight and your hot takes. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Kim. Always a great time. I'll see you on the next one.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to Movie Theater Butter, a Tilkim Productions podcast. Make sure to follow us where you're listening and on our Instagram page at the Movie Theater Butter podcast. And hey, it couldn't hurt if you gave us a quick 5-star rating on this platform. All right, I'm done. See you next episode.